So let's talk about, for anybody who doesn't know, who's never heard of who Mpumi Nobiva is, tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm an international speaker. Well, that's really been the profession that has led my career, but I'm actually an artist. I studied visual arts at school, and I lived in the United States. I went to the Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy for Girls in South Africa. I graduated in the first class. I was recruited in 2006 after over 10,000 applicants from all over South Africa came in, and about 120 of us were accepted. So it was very competitive. But all of us came from poor backgrounds. We just happened to be very hard workers academically, which afforded us a lifetime opportunity to a world-class education. And I graduated among the top of my class at the academy and secured a full ride scholarship to the United States. I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina for 4 years, pursuing my honors degree in interdisciplinary studies, where I focused on global leadership, international relations and communications. And then I graduated magna at the top of that class, and then I was able to get a presidential scholarship to complete my master's degree in strategic communications. And then I moved to LA and I worked at a leadership software company because I did a lot of social advocacy work. I've always been very vocal about the AIDS epidemic in South Africa. My mother was one of 250,000 people who died in the year 2002 because of the spread of AIDS and the lack of adequate healthcare systems. And yeah, I've been very vocal about sharing the power of stories, about overcoming your circumstances, about the power of education as the ultimate equalizer, and advocating for every young girl, particularly on the continent, to have access to good quality education. Because it's true, when you educate a girl, you educate a nation, you impact her family, you impact the community, you impact her village, and so forth. And I always advocated for that. And for a long time, that's what I did. Until last year, I burned out because I was working so hard. I took on a lot of work. I remember we met while I was doing a 10-city speaking tour in Canada. And I was just about to sign another contract to do 30 more cities in the US before I burned out. I would work myself to a pulp because I think in a lot of ways I still carried the fear of going back to poverty and the guilt for surviving, being the only one out of my family to make it out, you know what I mean? And it took a toll on my mental health. So it's been a humbling journey to go through all of this success as the only person in my family, in my neighborhood, in my region, to experience that level of success, and then find myself in a position where I felt so vulnerable and naked, where suddenly I was not okay. Everything that I'd gone through in life, the trauma I had faced, it caught up with me, and it's been quite a humbling experience. So my journey continues to evolve. Yeah, but I'd say I'm a storyteller fundamentally. I love to tell stories, and that's really where I am now. Yeah, I love to tell stories.
That you do. So let's actually kind of go back to your life story and some of the things that happened. So you talk about the fact that your mother was one of, what's the stat? You said 200 and how many thousand people who died from?
250,000 people who died in sub-Saharan Africa.
A quarter of a million people. Why is it that, as someone who is a child of a person who died from HIV/AIDS or complications from HIV/AIDS, why do you think there's still such a stigma in Africa, and yet it is so prevalent in our communities and in our societies?
I think it's such an intricate thing because of how it's transmitted. It has a sexual denotation to it because it's primarily transmitted through sexual intercourse. There was a lot of fear instigated, and I think just the reality of how it's uncurable, how it wipes you out in a matter of months. I mean, I think a lot of people would prefer to say someone died of cancer or of a kidney failure than to actually say they died of AIDS, and it's so unfortunate because I think it has a lot to do with our own psychology coming from this region of the world. Because, for instance, Magic Johnson contracted the virus in the early 90s, and he's still alive. He's still on red carpets with his children. His family still gets to enjoy him. My mother contracted the virus the year 2000, and she was dead by 2002. And primarily because of the part of the world she was in, the healthcare systems, the cultural stigma. There's a whole cocktail that goes into why it kills us at such crazy rates, And when you spend time in first world countries, you see that in a lot of ways, AIDS is now like cancer. It's still very serious in society, but it no longer denotes death. It no longer demeans a person to be less than a human being or to be less deserving of love and respect and dignity. So in a lot of ways, I think it's because of the trauma that our people went through when the virus just spread out the way it did. I think naturally women are carriers of the virus because of our biology, but women are also traditionally in a subservient role in the African family unit system with the role of patriarchy. So there was a lot of shame, there was a lot of hiding, there was a lot of suppressing emotion and feelings, just a lot of injustice around how the virus, and the reason I'd always been outspoken about my mother is because she was able to talk to me before she died. She was 25 when she contracted the virus and dead by 27. And 1 year, 6 months before she died, I was 9 years old. She sat me down and she told me I have AIDS and I'm going to die. And she told me that I would have to work hard in school, be good to my grandmother, and never stop believing in God because I grown up in church. That's where I learned how to speak English. And she made me promise these things. But the power of her sharing her story was how she was able to overcome that, where now this thing that was traditionally going to bring me shame and a stain became my covenant. It became the very driving force for my early academic success. So the reason I would feel defensive over her legacy when her name would come up and people would whisper, or, people would talk about how she died, and somebody would naturally want to say, no, it was cancer, not AIDS. I'll always stand against that because I feel like her spirit triumphed over it when she was able to claim her truth over the situation. And I wish a lot more people would do that, because there's so many couples who are able to get married and have children and have a beautiful life. I mean, I've had people who are like, I've had the virus for 2 decades and I'm fine. And you take that and you compare it to somebody who is at a doctor's office, is very miseducated about the virus, finds out that they're positive and immediately wants to go kill themselves, when from a scientific point, yes, the virus is detectable, but it's not even active in your system. So your own psychology begins to kill you way before the virus itself can even kick into your system.
So with your mother, what do you think it was about her? And I'm not even sure, how does she explain to a 9-year-old what HIV, AIDS is, what dying means, what, work hard and, take care of. What was that conversation? And were you able to comprehend it at 9 years old?
No, I just knew what death was, because the year before she had been pregnant and suffered a miscarriage. Mm-hmm. And so when my mother said, Sean, I'm going to die, I knew in my 9-year-old mind what that meant. And I remember getting really emotional. I started breathing heavy and my eyes were tearing up. And she held me by the face and she said, you have to go on. You have to turn out different than I did. You have to work hard in school. So I think the conversation came from a place of love, It came from, I learned from another close friend of my mother, who was a white lady that had employed my grandmother for domestic work. When I turned 21, she sat me down and she told me that when my mother found out she was positive and that she was dying, I was her only concern. I was her only child, and that haunted her, how I would be left alone in the world. And I think she thought about it and she sat with it a lot. And some part of her just might have resoluted to I should just tell her the truth so that she can at least have that as an armor going forward into the world without me. And honestly, for me, I remember the conversation scared me so much that I didn't tell anyone about it until about a year later, when my mom was visibly dying. And I told it to my grand to try and soothe her, to say, it's okay, I've already accepted what's happening. I know what's happening. Mama has spoken to me. And at this point, she was in very, very bad condition, barely recognizable. And I guess it was my way of surrendering her, you know? But that's why I believe in the power of story. I really do believe that just like the art we create, the stories we tell are alive. The words we share have real vibration and real meaning. Like, that's how powerful we are, especially even as African people of the original cradle of creation and humanity. Like, in the beginning was the Word, right? And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And so when we can tell our stories, it's somewhat the greatest wealth that you can pass on to the next generation, because it's the gift of truth. When you're able to step out of the idea of perfection and actually just surrender to your humanity and live from a place of what lessons have I gotten from my life experiences? Where have I fallen short? And how can I share this and impart so that the next generation is not likely to repeat the very same mistakes? I think there's a sense of liberation, because then you give it back into the world and it takes on a whole different meaning, you know? It does. Stories are that powerful, in my opinion.
I 100% agree with you about the power of story. And I love what you said, Mpumi, about we need to own our stories, because a lot of the time we carry such shame. And yet those stories, like, what is it? Your mess is your message. You sharing what in your perception is your weakness, your mess, the things that have gone wrong, actually helps to empower someone else who might be going through the same things.
It really is a great indicator of inner strength. I would say this to people who, I remember once I was speaking to a young girl who was gang raped by more than 8 men, tested positive, then suffered a miscarriage. And she was saying, I'm so ashamed. I could never talk about this. And I was saying to her, I wish you could, because then you would see just how strong you are. The fact that you've lived through such atrocities, like just one of those things are enough to kill one person in a lifetime. They're enough to end a lifetime. And you have triumphed over and over and over, which means that there is something in you. There's a genius in you. There's a strength in you that is so powerful that if the world could hear, would elevate our consciousness and help us understand just how strong we are as people. And in most cases, it's women. It's women who go through these unspoken atrocities, and they sit with them and harbor them. And what I'm learning, the reason I crashed and the reason I had to really take time to learn how to love myself and really get to know myself, is because there's real weight when you encounter something. It impacts your energy level in such a real way. I wish we knew how to express so that we can relieve ourselves from that.
Mpumi, let's talk about that. So you've referenced this a few times about I crashed and I didn't come out and all of that. So the last time you talked about the last time you and I met in person, you were on tour, where literally every weekend you were flying somewhere, speaking somewhere. You had this high-flying job. You had the apartment in LA. You were, from the outside, it looked like you were living the dream. And then you just disappeared. So what happened and how did it happen? How do you think it happened?
I actually thought I was living the dream. I had, at 25, I'm 27 now. At 25, I had checked all the boxes of what success looked like, of what the world told me success was, right? Get your master's degree, get your education, But what I hadn't learned and what the world hadn't taught me is that there's a real price we pay to be human. There's a real price we pay for the experiences we go through. What happened to me when I was in LA is, because I was so fixated on this idea of success and because I was so driven, what I wasn't realizing is that the motivating force of my success was fear. I was afraid of failing. I was afraid of losing what I've built and ending up back home. Every phone call that I make home is one of poverty, of struggle. Someone's in jail, someone's in hospital. And what I didn't know was happening in my life is I started to emotionally distance myself from things and people I love because it just became too much to bear. And so it wasn't until I had just defended my master's thesis, and while I was on tour in Canada, I flew back into Charlotte. I defended my thesis, then I flew back to Los Angeles. And in my spirit, I felt very unsettled. I couldn't stop thinking about my uncle, who is my mother's younger brother, who has been unemployed for a very long time and has been in a tough place mentally for about 5 years now. And I couldn't shake his essence of my spirit. And I tried to call him when I got to Los Angeles and it wasn't going through. I had no particular reason why I felt like I needed to reach him, but I felt important. And my sister, who was living at my place at the time, had bought champagne and flowers. I mean, I'd just done my master's working. I'm doing all these miracle works, right? And she was like, we need to go out and celebrate. Like, you're going to be fine. We went out, we celebrated, came back, slept, and I woke up the next day and I called my uncle up. I just couldn't shake him. And when I finally did get a hold of him, I could barely recognize the voice on the other side of the phone. So I called him right after he had put his son to bed. I had moved his family from the back room that they were living in to a flat apartment on the 5th floor of a building. And because he's been unemployed and depressed and his wife has had to carry the weight of the family, he was suicidal. So I called him at the time where he just was letting out these cries because he was getting himself ready to jump off that building. And that experience shook me because when I was on the phone saying, Malume, hello, are you okay? Like, I'm trying to figure out what's happening. And he's busy crying, saying, I'm so sorry to do this to you. So sorry to do this to you guys. I just can't take this anymore. I lost it. Like, something in my head went off because the way I've seen death in my life, the way I've lost so many people in my life, particularly to issues that are humanitarian because of AIDS, poverty, unemployment, politics. That's what happens when you're poor. You're directly impacted by the system. And I fought for his life over the phone for over 2 hours of my life. And thank God he's still with us today. But something changed in my mentality that day. Like, I was really traumatized by having to beg for his life like that. And then I checked myself into therapy. But after that experience, I started to question what the success meant if people close to me were still in so much danger. And I became really depressed. Then I fell into a deeper depression as more young women were being killed in South Africa because I was working for a leadership software company. And my job is always to create systems and technologies that support movements on the ground. And I became tired. This is 2019, 2018. I was just in South Africa, 2016, burying my grandfather. Karabo Mugwena got killed. We did a whole campaign, raised awareness. Her name trended on Twitter for a few weeks. That was it. And between Karabo and now, we've lost over 200 women in this country. This is the point I'm making about unprocessed trauma, right? I just got to a point where this life became too much for me. I felt suffocated. I felt like there was no real place to go. I felt like I wasn't safe coming back home where I could be killed at a post office or a restaurant. And naturally, people around me started to show me that, you know, I was even changing in my mannerisms. Like, I started leaving the house less. I became really obsessed with my work. I wouldn't get away from my work because I was obsessed with finding a solution that's going to help us. But really what I learned once I had been in therapy and was receiving all this help was that I was really trying to help myself. It was a really humbling experience. I mean, I was admitted into Breathe facilities in LA, which is like a therapy center. Most celebrities go there when they feel overwhelmed. So I was lucky that I had a benefactor who could afford me that. And I was in a place called the Professional House. So I had a whole house to myself. And I would paint and cry and write and go to the ocean. It was a really spiritually purging process. But that's when I learned for the first time, when I would sit with professional people who would help me understand, listen, the reason you're crashing is because you're not only carrying your own traumas, but you're also carrying generational trauma with you. And the way they explained that to me really humbled me, because as a smart person, I theorized this concept. I thought that passing down traumas is when a woman fails to speak up or stand up to her husband in front of her children, they would look at that behavior and internalize it as it is appropriate, right? Or when a son watches his father beat his mother and exercise authority in a household, he would internalize that as a behavior of somebody who is powerful and further enforce that in his life. Well, guess what? That's not where it ends. It's actually deeper than that. I thought it's just passing down the behavioral mechanisms. But the truth is, my DNA structure was in my mother's DNA structure, and that DNA structure was in my grandmother's DNA structure. And so when I heard that, I just sunk in my seat. That's way before I would be born, hit by a car by 6 years old, food poisoning by 9, watching my mother die. You understand? So all of that caught up with me because we're human. But we're not taught that. We're not taught that actually what you're going through is so real. And so people crash, people become suicidal, people kill themselves, people develop addictions, people become alcoholics, they have porn and sex addictions, gambling addictions, drug addictions. We see this show up across the board, but it's never been understood the way we're able to understand it now. And the moment I got that, I just felt like I needed to step away from all of this because I need love. I need to love myself in a different way than I have been.
That's so true what you're saying, Mpumi, that it's so deep and it's so multi-layered, and it's not something that sits up in your face and says, oh, look, your arm is sore, put some whatever bandage on it. It's all these wounds that we don't even realize we're carrying. And you said something so profound, that so much of what you were doing and what was motivating you was fear, the fear of losing it all, the fear of going back to the life, all of these things, but also I'm going to guess a level of guilt, because it's that, like you said, you're the one who got
it. So you carry the weight you feel the guilt of surviving, right? The first time I was having dinner at Miss Winfrey's house is one of her daughter girls who are living in the United States. And I ran off the table. I remember we were having salmon because I couldn't process it. You understand? I'm literally on the phone minutes before speaking to family, and they don't have enough food. Those are my people. That's where I came from. We used to break from the same bread. And now suddenly I'm sitting in front of a 5-star platter meal and I couldn't eat. That's how deep it is, right? The fact that I went from being a child to the person who has all the answers because I was able to succeed and put a couple of zeros in my bank account, it changed the whole dynamic. So instead of becoming a child who could rely on adults, I had the weight of adults fall directly on me. And as African children, because when we would share this with our African American friends or adults around us, they wouldn't understand. Like, why are you giving them money? You're the kid. No, what you doing? It's like, I'm African. I pick up $50, 40 of that is going to the house. It's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. It's the way our culture is structured, right? If I have a full chicken, it means my whole street gets to eat. I don't know how to eat a full chicken alone. And here I was in a part of the world that was teaching me that you had to do that to survive. And so I had to live through all of that, and it was a really humbling experience to be the person who crashes because I'm not used to being on the receiving end of anything.
I mean, even like what I was saying earlier, that from the outside, people see the outside and they're seeing there's Mpumi speaking on stages in front of tens of thousands. There's Mpumi at the White House. Like you said, there's Mpumi at Oprah Winfrey's house and all that. So it's almost like, well, but how can she be sad? How can she be depressed? People don't understand that comes with its own baggage and its own weight, right?
And in fact, it's not just from the outside. I mean, I saw it that way too, right? that's how I structured my life. My value system was on these external points of success and these individuals I was surrounded by and these materialistic things I could point to, which is a very common trait for us Africans. The moment we can collect some coins, it's got to be visible, right? And I thought I was successful, right? Because I guess in a lot of social terms, I was. I'm usually in rooms where I'm the youngest person or the only Black person or the only woman, right? Because I was working in technology. And so, but that's what we're learning is we need to deconstruct what success means for the African. We need to deconstruct what religion is for the African. We need to deconstruct what spirituality is, what mental health is for the African, right?
So let's talk about that, Mpumi. So in your case, what does success now mean to Mpumi?
Being able to feel joy, being able to feel pain when a painful memory comes to sight, being able to speak up for myself, even when my heart is beating and I'm crazy scared because I grew up with such a fear of rejection, right? A successful day for me is when I can walk through the day as authentically myself as possible without dimming my light, trying to make myself smaller, without being apologetic for my successes, but also not being apologetic for the traumas and the wounds that I've endured throughout the process, being able to maintain my peace no matter what a day presents to me, being able to wholeheartedly be connected to the experiences that I'm having. And the reason that this means so much more to me than the way I used to live before is because the way I lived before, I wouldn't allow myself to feel. My theory was if my heart is closed, if I don't feel, if I protect myself, then I won't feel loss, I won't feel pain. And so my heart became closed over time. So what I became really good at was being this star, being this career woman. I was basically an actress, and a lot of people do this, and it's exhausting. Where you have a posture in your relationships, you have a posture in public, you have this poise, you're holding your head up, but you're acting because you're going through moments in the day that challenge you, moments that trigger your trauma, moments where you need to stand up for yourself, neglect to do those things, or you go through moments in the day where you're triggered by things that are irrelevant, you're lashing out at people. That's not in my nature, but some people show their symptoms in that way. And so I used to run from my pain. Now, a good day is when I can be open to any experience of pain, be it a call with an adult I love and having to say, no, I cannot give you that money, which is a hard thing for me to do. But being able to do that with an open heart and a place of love and accepting that I am lovable, whether I'm able to give you what you want or not, right? That for me is a day of success. And that's a big win for a girl who suffered so much from the need to please and so much from the guilt of being the one who succeeded, that I would wear so many masks, even to people I loved. I felt like I was unworthy of my own truth. But ending up at a hospital is a really humbling experience. To find yourself on a hospital bed with a sheet of diagnosis, for me, it changed the game, because it's those quiet nights when the thousands of followers you have on your Instagram, they're not in your room. The journalists, the big audiences that applaud you, the people who say slay, kill it, they're nowhere to be found. And the people who do love you can't walk through those moments with you. And those are the moments that make all the difference. Those are the moments that mean people either surrender or they snap. The moment where you surrender to the healing or you end up hanging from the ceiling or jumping from the window. And so when you've reached that edge in life, the way I have, there's something you come back with, a sense of solitude. Because people misunderstand loneliness and solitude. It's not the same thing. Solitude means you're able to exist independently and be of your own independent essence and have your own stature, independent or irregardless of the forces that happen around you. And that takes real work for an African girl who grew up not knowing how to love herself. And so that's what a successful day looks like to me, when I can go to bed and feel like I didn't sell myself out at any point.
So what's next for you, Mpumi? Like, where do you see yourself going?
So excited. I'm really excited about this chapter of my life, because things are happening and I don't have to put in as much work as I had to in the past. That's the beauty of surrendering. And I wish this for so many people, because surrender immediately denotes failure, right? I remember when my mentor first told me, you need to surrender it. And I was like, oh, this is my work, this is my life. But even me deleting my old Instagram account with that big community, all the people, the people I was following, it's like crazy. It's like, I don't even know if I'll ever meet some of them again. But me having to surrender all of that was a way for me to say, I finally get it, that this has been an idea of what my life is supposed to be. And I've done a good job running that race. But it's so tiring. So tiring. I want love. I want family. I want relationships. I want fun. I want connection. I want a spirituality, wisdom, so many things. And so this whole experience gave me an opportunity. Well, honestly, I feel in a lot of ways that the way it happened was so spiritual that it wasn't by choosing, it happened for me when I crashed and everything. But there was a point where I needed to surrender my old self, my old life, and say, okay, I get it now. And doing that put me at the lowest of places possible that I could ever imagine myself. The way I was challenged to heal and pull myself back has also become the way that's presented all these possibilities for life, which is so exciting. I shared, once I was ready to come back to the public, I shared what I'd gone through. And to my surprise, it resonated with so many people. And what I love most is it's not just women this time. It's not just women and girls, but there are men who are able to talk about their mental health there. Because what we know is, so I'm qualified in the storytelling realm. I have a master's degree. I have a published thesis. But what we do know is that you are the story you tell. We are the stories we tell ourselves. And so your mental state then immediately informs what kind of story you tell yourself. And we become the stories we tell ourselves. So whatever story you're telling yourself is the story you recreate for yourself. And so it's really exciting for me to be at a place now where I'm starting to deconstruct those truths and break them down in ways that people can understand, where I can come back and offer this knowledge and this appreciation for the power of storytelling, but really couple it with the bigger power of insight and wisdom, knowing who you are, how you've been traumatized, knowing where you've been wounded, and how you can heal yourself back to life. So I'm working on long-term projects that are geared towards publishing. This year, I'm working on a virtual community solution where I want to create a space for all these people I'm talking to independently, because another thing, I'm not qualified. So I'm in people's DMs giving them advice from love, but people are not stable, or I can't, you know what I mean? Like, I shouldn't be doing that. So it became apparent to me that we need to build a structure around that. That's just the software leader in me that immediately says, okay, how do we organize this? How do we build the structure? How do we create a community where people can get what they need? And what my previous life has taught me is it's not smart to think you know the answers. Just because you have an idea of what could work does not mean you know. And so I have a whole different approach where now, instead of misusing my social media the way I used to feed my ego and my insecurities and to keep me company when I'm lonely, I've learned to use it as a tool. So now I know that when I come to my social media space, I'm coming to share knowledge, but I'm also using it to gain not insight from people. What do you need? What are your best mediums of storytelling? How can we help? Naturally, people have given me great feedback. They want podcast, video. They want mindfulness techniques. They want a community of storytellers, but also that's professionally informed. So somehow I have a team that's coming together, and it's global, which is really exciting to me. Friends from my old life are like here, popping up, extending their help. And so between now and September, we're building that platform. And I'm excited for that. And I'm also working on my first documentary project where I'm writing and producing a story about generational trauma. So I'm taking it all the way there.
It all sounds incredible. And I know in true Mpumi fashion, it will be, because I know you put your heart, your soul into everything that you do. And I want to ask you this question, Mpumi, because you've just talked about how for us as Africans, there's such a stigma associated with the whole thing of mental health. And you said as well, we're told that, oh, you're fine. Take it to go. You've got church. You got go to church and pray. And so, how?
Oh, you're crazy. You're crazy.
Exactly.
Right?
How do we?
That's the other end.
How do we start to have these conversations to address our mental health?
Honestly, this is not. And you see the professional space do this a lot. They won't say mental health. They'll say personal well-being. They'll say self-love. Right? Because it takes it away from the electricity of mental health. But the truth is, when I sat in that therapist room in Los Angeles and I understood the timeline of my trauma and just how it will take beyond my lifetime to I mean, my children's children, we have some real pattern breaking to do. I felt such an overwhelming sense of compassion for myself in a way I'd never felt before. Like, girl, you don't know love. You don't know joy. You don't really know freedom. Right? You don't. You have an idea. You have an idea, and that's what's been sold to you, but you don't when you really, really think about it. So for me, it's become not a question of mental health, although I use the words because I refuse for the words to have power over the human. It really is a question of love, of self-love, right? How do I begin to wrestle with the parts of me that I don't like? The parts of me that I'm so embarrassed and ashamed of? How do I begin to face that? Because, I mean, I became so good at ignoring my pain that even when I look in the mirror, I wouldn't recognize the person looking back, but I wouldn't even recognize that I'm not recognizing. When you're so used to evading and hiding. So I think it begins with that, with being able to sit with yourself and say, what am I really feeling?
It's a hard place to be, I think, to face your darkness. And so that's why so many of us don't want to do the work to face our darkness, because it is work to do it, right? It absolutely is work. It is hard. It's painful, right?
That race where I was with 10,000 people trying to get into that school was nothing. The nights of going from being an average student to a straight A and getting a US scholarship, nothing compared to the work that I find myself doing, right? Where journaling alone and allowing the tears to flow and owning the emotion and naming is so physically exhausting that all you can do is cry and sleep afterwards. It's that much work. But I can promise you, when you wake up the next day, literally as you get up, your chest feels lighter. As you stand up, your body weight feels lighter because it's a real physical location. And you don't know it because it's normalized. So like, I didn't know I was depressed when I was depressed. I mean, my friend would say, you okay? You weird. They'd walk into my apartment. Why are your curtains closed? Come, let's go out for lunch. I don't want to go. I got to a place where it was normal. I'm just stressed. No, it's fine. I'm going to pray about it. But what it really is, you become this program, this robot. You're just doing the same thing. And then a little thing happens and you're triggered. Or a little thing happens and you break down. So many of us are living like that. We just don't see. We've just mastered it. And we're afraid to be vulnerable because we think that's weakness, when in fact, that is strength.
Mpumi, we could talk forever. I know we could, because I always love talking to you. What's your big dream right now? End on a positive. What's the big dream for Mpumi right now?
A big dream for me is to be in a house full of my loved ones and my boyfriend who's African and his family, dancing with my grandmother, having published my first documentary script story. I want to do a ceremony just to thank life for my survival, thank the ancestors. So it's a real dream for me. I'm extending my grandmother's homestead. So I'm adding a few spaces to it and some rooms, because literally I have this dream where we can host the whole family. Everybody can sleep in one place. We can have a good time. Because again, once you've reached life's edge, you realize that those are the meaningful things. What we have at the end of it all are memories, are the moments we loved and received love. That's all. And to hopefully have my own family. Because this year I'm 27 and my mom was 27 when she died. And so I wrote a big letter this year, and I realized that even though the story was good for me, the story that I told that was able to feed me and change my life, it also became my crutch because I identified with it so much. So this year I put it to rest. I put the girl who watched her mother die to rest. I put my mother, who was 27 when she died, to rest. And now I'm writing a new story.
You know that I always end with this question. I love what you've just said about the woman you want to become. So in this moment right now, finish the sentence from Mpumi. I am.
Oh, man. Right now, yeah. I say right now, I am the power of creation and evolution personified. I'm just alive. And I'm free from so much that I didn't even know I was carrying. I'm free now. Right now, I'm free.
For me, it's always such a joy. And I said this to you the last time that we spoke. And in that context, it was a different conversation. I don't know what the it is, but you're destined to touch so many lives in this world. Like, I believe that whatever it is you're going to do, however it is, that your destiny is to impact. And I love the fact that you are owning your story. And what I love about what you just said, Mpumi, is as an outsider looking in, and the last time I met you, it felt like there was some conflict. Like there was a Mpumi who was still trying to find her feet to figure out who she was as a woman in the world, and where did her power come from? Was it from who she was? Was it from having been to the Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy? Was it from this story that was her life story? And for me, as a friend who is looking at you, it is such a beautiful thing that you are stepping into the power of you being Mpumi. That is a beautiful
thing. Thank you.
That is
I received that. Thank you so much.
And I cannot wait. Where can people, I know you announced this yesterday that you're kind of going to be a little bit off social media because you're working on creating this community, but where can people find more information? Where can people find information about the community when the time is right?
Honestly, my Instagram is just at Mpumi Nobiva. So the account is still there. I'm just not active. I'm also on Facebook. And my email, which I'm always open with, is literally mpuminobiva@gmail.com. Like it's first name, second name, gmail.com. But yeah, I've learned that I have to honor the creative force. And I have to live. I have to love. I have to really be here if I'm going to be served over there, so serving over there. So we're figuring that out, but people are more than welcome to like email, post. The prayer is that we will be able to get it right so much that it will find the people. That's the prayer.
That it'll find the people who need it. Yeah, absolutely. It will. It will. Mpumi, you know I love you. You know it's always such an honor to speak to you. I'm so grateful for you.
That's the prayer for you.
I love you.
Here's what I'd love to ask you as our community. So I want to know from you, who do you want me to have on the show? Who would you like me to interview? Who are some of the amazing women whose stories you would like for us to share on this platform? If you have any fantastic ideas, and even better, if you can connect me with them, please comment, leave your comment, or DM me and tell me who are some incredible stories I should be sharing on this platform. And the other ask that I have of you is for you to subscribe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook, and share. Please share. If you find any of our interviews inspiring, please share them with your friends and family.